Hello, everyone. I hope we're live because if we are, I'm excited about this particular show tonight. We have some phenomenal guests. They are pioneers in their sport, they are pioneers in life, they are pioneers in their professions, and they are the most knowledgeable people I know in a subject that's very dear to us. In honor of Black History Month, which just ended yesterday, and the beginning of Women's History Month, I thought, why don't we combine them and do a Black Women's History Month? Why don't we explore the greatness of who we are through generations? So I would like to introduce our panel tonight. Can we have them? Dr. Silva Carey Butler, who is a phenomenal leader in her field of social equity and diversity. She was the former executive director of United Negro College Fund and went on from there to become one of the top administrators in diversity at, I know, Wisconsin-Madison, Kennesaw State, now at Brown University. She's been at a number of places, but those are only the three of the most recent. And the things that she's doing at Brown University, you guys got to keep an eye on her. She's considered one of the foremost sought after experts in diversity in the country. Aside from Dr. Silva Carey Butler, we have the phenomenal Dr. Ingrid Wicker McCray. And she is everything. She is a former athlete, a former coach, a former athletic director, an entrepreneur, a consultant. She does it all. And she's about moving the needle in the lives of every organization she engages with and in every person she engages with. And she is presently also serving in one of her 9,000 hats as executive director for ABIS. This is how you're going to know how phenomenal Black women are, because all of these women that you see on this show are doctors, except me. What can I say? But they are multifaceted in their reach, and they're all solution-based, not problem-based, but solution-based individuals. Aside from that, Dr. Desi Wiss Jones. I just gonna call her Mother Desi. Mother Desi is a pioneer, a founder. She was a member of SNCC. She's from Oakland, and she was there during the civil rights movement with Dr. King, with the Black Panthers. So we're gonna really get some scoop from her. But she has an organization and decided to go off on her own path, along with a number of other phenomenal African-American women who created BWAPA, which is Black Women Organized for Political Action. Phenomenal group. You've got to tune in. You'll see their contacts flashed on the page throughout this. We've got to support. She's going to tell you about that, but you've got to see it. Be a BWAPA girl. What can I say? Look at our technicians. Aside from Dr. Desi Wiss Jones, we also have Dr. Debbie Stroman. Dr. Debbie Stroman is doing what I consider the impossible. She's a professor on staff at University of Virginia, as well as North Carolina. She is phenomenal, and that's on top of doing her own entrepreneurship. With consulting. She is a racial strategist. She does sports. She's a coach. She's an athlete. She's everything. We also will have coming on a little late because of a prior conflict, but you're going to love her as well, which is Dr. Dinah Berry, Ramey Berry. Dr. Berry is considered one of the foremost leaders on the slavery era and Black women in particular. So whenever there's a movie, so we're going to ask her some questions about Woman King and all of those things that people had some adversity with. But to start off, my co host, Dr. Ingrid, will give us a preview of, because I want you guys to also understand who, why, and who um, we are ABIS. Who are we, Dr. Ingrid?
So, good evening, and I am so honored to be on tonight as the co host with, of course, Coach Bev, as we affectionately call her. She is an amazing woman, and so to be blessed to be on with you all as well. I recently, and I apologize because I had my eyes dilated earlier, so they're a little glossy tonight. But ABIS, Advancement of Blacks in Sports, was founded in September 2020 by Gary Charles, who is affectionately known as the Godfather, New York Godfather of grassroots basketball in the United States, and several other notable Blacks in the sports industry and the entertainment industry. And ABIS was founded to really advocate for equity and inclusion of Blacks to advance racial, economic, and social justice across all avenues in the sports industry. We seek to partner and collaborate, as we're collaborating tonight with Coach Bebb, with other organizations and corporations to ensure that we have a greater presence in sports. I've been working with ABIS since September, and I can tell you there are some amazing people on the board, volunteers and advisory board, and just the members who make up the organization and who are very, very passionate about the work that we're doing, because there's such a dearth of representation, not just in the athletes space, but administrators, owners of teams and organizations. And so we're really blessed to partner with Coach Bev to help sponsor In Pursuit of.
And that's what we're going to talk about now, because in order for our generation to really move forward, sometimes you got to dip back and take a step back and listen to the historical perspective of where it all began. So I'm going to start the questioning because I'm excited about this. I'm really excited. So, Mother Desi, and I'm giving everyone permission to call her Mother Desi because the first time I met her, I was at home. This is who she is. So, Mother Desi, you were in the cusp of SNCC, Students Nonviolent Movie Movement, and you were also participant not with the Black Panther organization, but with some of the programming that they were putting together to support the community. And from what I understand, now you correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of those programmings were put together by women. And at some point with between the Black Panther and the nonviolence movement, there was a group of highly educated Black women who came together in Northern California and said, we need representation at the political level. And you guys combined all your skills and all your resources, am I correct? And what motivated you guys to take that step, considering you had the Black Panthers over here and you had the nonviolent movement over here, which was contrasting. And somewhere in the middle, you guys decided we got a better idea.
Well, first of all, good evening to you, my dear daughter. I love you dearly, babe. Appreciate all the work that you continue to do. And thank you for inviting me to participate on this dynamic panel of extraordinary women. That's always a pleasure for me, is to be around movers and shakers that are trying to make a difference in our community. So I thank you. And again, to all of the other sisters on the panel, the moderator, thank you so much for the work that you do. And it is my pleasure just to kind of talk a little bit about how we, BWAPA, got started and why. And as you just mentioned, Beverly, years ago, and I'm not ashamed. Matter of fact, I'm proud to let people know I am 81 years young. And I'm still on the battlefield, and I'm still trying to make sure that our presence as African American women is felt. So it is a pleasure to be called Mother Desi. And almost all of those folks that I work with throughout this area, California, and the states in the country. That's what they refer to me as Mother Desi. So I love it. Uh, Years ago, during again the civil rights movement, and of course the early '60s is when I really became involved. I had got graduated from high school and was in college, and there was a lot of course, unrest and activities going on then in terms of the civil rights movement. And somewhere in my spirit, because of the family, the household that I grew up with, I had a mother and a father who were really very active at their local level, in their churches. They were involved in, again, the NAACP, the National Council of Negro Women. My mother was one of the early lifetime members. But they always said to their children that if we were going to try to make a difference, we couldn't wait for someone else to do it, that you had to be engaged and be involved. So that was the spirit in which I grew up. And so even in high school, I was the founding member of the NAACP youth chapter, and just engaged in all of that. So I couldn't wait. Even when I was in college, I actually left college before I went back later and finished because SNCC was so involved. I kept hearing so much about the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And it was my pleasure at one time that Stokely Carmichael, of course, who changed his name to Kwame Ture, came to California to, talk about SNCC and the civil rights movement. And a dear, dear friend of mine and I, and roommate Benetta Ivy, known as Benny Ivy, very involved continuously at this time again, out of Atlanta, Georgia, and SNCC. Um, we said we're going to go and join this effort, and so we did. So I went to Atlanta, but even prior to going to Atlanta, we decided to take a trip around the world. We went to Africa and we looked at what was going on with the struggle there with our sisters and brothers and the various continents of Africa. We went to Ghana, we went to Kenya, and then we left and we went to the Caribbean islands. And I think this is so important because I encourage young people to not just know what's happening in this country, but what our struggle has been across this nation, across this world. And so we left and we went to the Caribbeans and we traveled and we looked at what was going on in Jamaica and Trinidad. And as a matter of fact, we got kicked out of Trinidad because they told us we were too much like the Stokely Carmiles. And so they put us on the ship and said, you all are troublemakers and you got to get out of here. And so, but the key thing for Black women is I think as I journeyed back to this region and to this area and came back to Northern California after living in Atlanta and working at the national office of SNCC for a number of years. Came back to California and wanted to be engaged. And what we saw is that Black women really did not have a prominent place at the public policy making tables. We were not there. We were not there at the local levels and numbers. We were not there in the statewide numbers. We were not there really in the national numbers. And so where we were talking about people making a difference, there was no place at the table. Now, it's become very popular, as you know now, for folks to say, well, if there's no seat at the table, to bring your own. Well, we really did that. But not only did we bring our own, we knocked down their table and we brought our own table. And so it was like, we didn't have to be invited to your table, but we knew that we had to find a way to make sure the voices of African American women, Black women, were involved. And so that was actually the genesis of starting Black Women Organized for Political Action, BWAPA. And so we were founded in Oakland, California, actually. 13 of us women, very dynamic, strong women. Let me tell you, some powerful sisters, educators, businesswomen, parks and recreation directors. But they was powerful. And we would sit around what we call our little political roundtable. And I'm going to tell you, it was not always pleasant conversations. I'm a little older and I've learned to control my mouth, but there was a very, very strong debates, and we met that we needed to make a change in what was going on in our city and our state. But what we did it out of love. And when we had disagreements, we rallied around those disagreements. But we walked away as sisters. We walked away as together, and we began to make change. So let me kind of move this through because I know you got a lot of other sisters and
No,
people.
I don't want to miss this part though, Dr. Desi. What you said is something that everyone on this call, and if you're watching this after this is over, I don't want you to miss this. She said there were disagreements, but those disagreements were exhibited in love. It didn't break them up, it didn't deter from the outcome, but disagreements are part of the solution. It should not call for a divide. That's critical.
Absolutely correct. And that was the strength of Black women, I think. We knew how to come together and say, okay, well, if we don't necessarily agree with this, how do we come together and build a united strategy? And how do we again build this out of love and support and uplifting each other and making sure that we again found a way to be inclusive and make sure that women were at the table. So, having done that, these 13 very strong and powerful women called together a meeting under the, at that time, direction of what I like to call our founder. There were 13 of us, but Edith Austin was a powerful journalist, a tough old sister girl, and she was an educator. And I'm going to tell you, if I could just show you a picture of Edith, you would know how powerful she was. But Edith said, let's call together Black women to see how many people would like to be involved in the political process. And we had at that time been working to help elect Ron Dellums, who would later become one of the first strong, powerful congressional representatives out of the Bay Area. And we raised this 13 of us came together and raised close to $90,000 to help get Ron elected. Now, you imagine how much money that was in 1966, 67, and 68? $90,000. Women raised that money. And so after doing that, we said, let's call this meeting. And she was a journalist. She was the editor of a Black newspaper, the Sun Reporter in the Bay Area. She put a little notice in there that we were going to meet at then what was known as the Rainbow Sign, the only Black cultural center in the Bay Area in Berkeley, under the auspices of our dear sister. And so we thought 30 or 40 people would show up. There was 30 of us. We were looking for 30 or 40. Close to 250 Black women showed up to the Rainbow Sign that evening. And with that was the beginning of BWAPA. And BWAPA, then we have, of course, expanded, but we talked about at that time how important it was for us to train Black women to be leaders. We had been taught, I'm sure as all these sisters on this table know, when you're younger, we didn't talk politics at our dinner tables, at the families. We didn't talk politics at the gatherings, at our homes and social events. But that's a group of strong women that said we had to talk politics. We had to talk policy. What was going on with women in healthcare and the lack of proper education? What was going on with the fact that housing and economic development and crime was issues in us? And we were not at those tables. So we had to really encourage women to understand that they needed to have a voice and that they didn't necessarily want to run for office. They needed to support women who was willing and had the courage to get out there. And I'm going to say one more thing, and I think I'll just be quiet until questions come. But one of the significant things we found we had to really do is train our sisters how to give. Not only how to speak up, but how to give. We have learned over the years it's fine to go out and buy expensive clothing, even when we didn't have the money. I know some of you sisters know what I'm talking about. We would buy those Louis Vuittons and those Coach bags and, all the top brands. We didn't mind spending $150 to a year. We even were wearing those same jobs, all in the Cabosa stores. We know what we're talking about. We were wearing all those expensive clothing. But when we asked people to donate to support a Black woman's candidate especially, people felt almost like it was an imposition. And so when they donated $25, they thought they were doing something. So part of our thing was we had to train and learn people how to encourage and say, you got to pay for your best interest. You've got to learn how to support what's going to be best for you. And so now when I look at what we're doing in California, the Legislative Black Caucus, the women that are serving there are all lifetime members of BWAPA. Our Vice President, Sister Kamala Harris, came out of the Bay Area and is a member of our organization and has been a longtime member. Our Sister Barbara Lee, who is one of the strongest congressional representatives in the state, representing Black people, not just only in this area, but a voice throughout this nation, is a member, a lifetime member of BWAPA. It's that kind of incentive that we want to create in that kind of spirit that we try to train young women now to also say, you can and you will, but you must. You must be at the table. You must have the courage to step out. And so BWAPA is that kind of voice. I'm just grateful they still let this old lady be around. I've been trying to groom, and I'm just delighted with all of the young sisters out there that are taking a hold and taking up. We have a phenomenal executive director, uh, Lenise Jones, who is now the executive director of the California State Legislative Black Caucus, doing phenomenal things. Mayors all over. Our sister Karen Bass. How about that? A mayor of the first strong Black woman mayor of Los Angeles. So I'm not saying that politics is the only solution and answer to all of our problems. Education, our college presidents, our economic development, our business team, teaching people how to be entrepreneurs. It's all about supporting all of those sisters, but it starts with the notion of us uplifting each other, inspiring each other, encouraging each other, and saying we've got to have a voice at all. Did you hear me? All the tables, all the tables. So thank you just for going to allow me to share a little bit, and I appreciate you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing from others on the panel as well.
Well, I wanted just to say,
Yes.
Dr. Desi, that I was so I just joy in my heart when you mentioned the National Council for Negro Women. And I was exposed to them and Dr. Dorothy Height at a very, very young age, 10 years old, at one of the churches here in Durham. And so I just think about all these women, yourself. I walked into the Marriott in Baltimore last week, and there is a wax statue of Shirley Chisholm. It's
Yes.
things like that where you're saying in terms of educating our young people, but they have to be able to see it. And so I really appreciate you bringing back that memory for me and probably for so many others when you shared that about the history of Bawaka. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for standing on those shoulders as we stood on those shoulders, and we're going to keep on encouraging our young people to move forward. I just want to say, Black Life Matters. The young women came along, and I've spoken to a lot of those young leaders because sometimes they forget that SNCC was Black Life Matters back in the day. And they think that, well, what were you all doing? Well, we were doing what you were doing, but we're just doing it at a different time. And so it matters what we did and where they are now. So thank you so much for your comments, my dear sister.
And now I'm going to go to our most recent people in that space, which is Dr. Deb and Dr. Debbie and Dr. Sylvia. Phenomenal. As I listen to Mother Desi, and I am bringing myself very present. Mississippi is trying to bring back Jim Crow. They're trying to bring back all white juries. There is more hatred right now. We're at the cusp of it. And you guys are on the forefront of that battle. You're working within institutions. Dr. Sylvia, you moved from United Negro College Fund right into predominantly white institutions, as well as that's your space as well. But you're bringing the culture with you.
Oh,
So
let me
let's
just
talk
tell you.
about that.
Let me just tell you first, thank you for the opportunity to be on this panel. And Mother Desi, I feel like I was in a master class. What I will say is that you are absolutely spot on. You know, I too stand on the shoulders of so many women, and the whole notion of community we need community more as Black women in the academy than any time. We are under assault. Um, I am certainly excited about the work that I do, but oftentimes right now, the emotional tax, I feel angry. I feel as if we've taken steps forward and we're taking steps back. But I'm not discouraged when I hear about the work and the foundation that so many have laid for us. It is our responsibility to carry this torch forward, to face this assault head on, to not be silent about it, to amplify our voices, our scholarship, to address these issues. The emotional tax of being Black in America, of being a Black woman in America, on an everyday basis. We're all fortunate. We're sitting in positions of privilege because of our education and the positions that we have. There are approximately 20%, in 2021, 20% of the American population were women of color. Of that percentage, 13 or almost 14% were African American women. Our numbers continue to increase, and most of our numbers are they don't have the privilege of the things and access that we have. And so we have to continue this work. And if we are not at the table, bringing our own table, then we are the meal. And and that is a big concern. So I think that the greatest equalizer is education, but not just education in the traditional sense. How do we educate our communities, our youth, our young people, so that they're aware of their histories? Going back to the Saturday schools, that took place years ago. If they're taking books out of the library, if they are removing DEI from institutions, it's a slippery slope. We've got Georgia, we've got Oklahoma, we've got Florida, and there are going to be other states that are going to try and follow. But here's what I've understood from the women's suffrage movement when the Deltas demanded to march in front and not in the back of the line, that Black women will not allow us to be marginalized. We will fight, we will be on the forefront, but we do have a responsibility to be in community and to educate and to share the things that we know, and to spend time lifting up young women. I think that there's this generational gap. If you should know that there are 5 generations in a workplace. And oftentimes, I'm a baby boomer. And so, oftentimes young people don't take the time to understand some of the history. And old folks, old heads like me, are oftentimes frustrated. But there are organizations, there are opportunities for us to engage with each other, to learn from each other, and to really underscore the importance of this assault that's taken place. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So this anger that I feel, this rage about what's happening, about white men making decisions about women's bodies, Black bodies, trying to taking away voting rights, access to education. It doesn't change our history, and it doesn't change anything. It should really be the thing that motivates us to spend time engaging in community with each other, to ensure that we can work to mitigate against the things that are taking place. And I'm going to shut up right here.
That was phenomenal and so very true. I'm like Dr. Ingrid. Your words. I'm almost speechless after our first 2 speakers. Would you like to add anything on there? And I just want to say one thing though. the greatness that Dr. Sylvia spoke about is in everything you do, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a student, whether you're just out in public, you represent the culture of who we are. So your greatness doesn't have to be displayed by marching. It can be displayed by maximizing the gifts that you've been given in whatever arena that you're in. So I just wanted to add that in. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Ingrid, if you have any comments. If not, we'll switch it over to Dr. Debbie.
I just had one for Dr. Butler. So most of your career has been on the Dr. Deb, the historically white college. It's a whole nother story. Y'all can't wait to hear her talk about this. But how would you advocate for HBCUs to do more in this space as well in terms of DEIB? Because I think it's already assumed that because it isn't a Black college, we don't need to do that. And a colleague of mine, Jen Fry, does a lot of work in this space. And I'm trying to, I'm moving her and pushing her to also reach out to more of our HBCUs, because our students, when they leave, they're going to be in the majority world. And so what are your thoughts about HBCUs and how they can do more in this DEIB space?
Absolutely love HBCUs. In fact, I have a significant initiative with several HBCUs. It's not that HBCUs don't understand the importance of DEI and creating a sense of belonging. And in fact, what I have said to Brown, that if we really truly want to understand how to ensure that everyone matters on a campus, look at the way HBCUs support and move students to and through. Are they perfect? No, but no institution is perfect. So through collaborations, having an opportunity for students to engage with each other, talking to presidents about the importance of, you'd be surprised that there have been some HBCUs that don't necessarily teach Black history, right? There was a panel, I had a symposium on Lonnie Grenier and Bell Hooks, and Beverly Guy Sheftelfer Spellman spoke, and she spoke truth to power. She reminded me that as I was amplifying and lifting up and lifting out HBCUs, that they aren't always at the forefront of advancing the history. So I think that there's a lot that we can learn from each other. I am a strong advocate for HBCUs, and I'm a strong advocate of what HBCUs produce in their students: a sense of self-efficacy, a sense of competence and confidence that you can't bottle at a predominantly white institution. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I hope that I have demonstrated my passion for and love of HBCUs.
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Debbie?
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to be with you and to sit at the feet of Mother Desi. I appreciate that opportunity and to hear your words. So much has been said tonight, and I certainly double down on that. My perspective is one of athletics and is one of business leadership. So I often blend the two in terms of concepts and ideas and thoughts to mull over. And so first off, I want to bring up faith. And certainly as Black women, faith has meant so much to us in this journey. And so as we venture down this path of motivating young women, motivating others, that we have to hold grace. Because as we know, these United States haven't done a very good job of teaching us the history, the full history of this country. And so with that being said, when we're trying to call people into this work, not calling them out, we call out systems and institutions, but when we're calling people into this space, people might make mistakes. And we can't shut them down. We can't say, you don't have any value, you made this mistake, or you used that incorrect phrase. We have to call people in, and that means holding grace for one another and understanding that we are all lifelong learners in this space. I have years of experience in this, in the classroom, in the office, in the field as an organizer. And still, I am a lifelong learner. So let's hold grace for one another. Being an educator, I'm thinking about, and maybe this is a different perspective. Education's great, but it's not the great equalizer. It's not the great equalizer. Oftentimes, when we think about how we are going to improve society, as in making sure that everybody has great outcomes, we often look at education. How many degrees do you have? How many letters behind your name? As a way that can solve all of these challenges that we have to overcome all the barriers. But what we found is wherever you are on the socioeconomic spectrum as an educational attainment, if we can use that as a proxy, that we still see inequities happening with people who make six figures, with people who have a mansion, people who have a Lamborghini, people who are wearing Burberry clothing and St. John's and Tom Ford. And we also see inequities at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. And so education's great, and I'm encouraging people to continue to develop the brain, develop the mind, but we can't believe for a second that once one has that educational attainment, that things are going to be great, things are going to be fine. I also believe that there's another part of this. Education, great, but we need engagement. And so I've heard it from my sisters tonight that we need to be engaged. There is no time to be on the sideline. You have to use your voice, you have to use your platform. And whether that platform is extensive, as in it's global, whether it's national, whether it's in your local community, whether or not it's in your own immediate family. This is not a time for silence. We are in crisis mode and we need everybody to step up. Share your gifts, identify your gifts. If you're not sure on your gifts, ask people who are close to you. What are you good at? How can you help the movement? As it's been stated, it's not a moment. This is a movement. And so we need everyone to be engaged. I want to close by referencing what Dr. Ingrid stated in terms of HBCUs and PWIs. Well, language evolves, just like we don't say that people are retarded anymore. Language evolves in this space. And the closer you are to the community, you know about the language and the changes. And so there are many organizers, activists, scholars, researchers who've moved away from using PWI, predominantly white institutions, because it does not tell the full history. They are historically white. They excluded Black people. Now we've got HBCUs because Blacks were not allowed to attend these universities, attend these colleges. And so we say HWIs or HWCUs so that we can tell the full story about the history. And HBCUs were never exclusive just to Blacks, but there was no need for whites to attend. And so if I can add one thing to this conversation tonight is to help us change the language and use language that is more revealing, more truthful, and it allows us to move the needle a bit in terms of how we engage with one another.
And I think that's of critical importance, what was just said, Dr. Deb, because they weren't originally predominantly white institutions. They were historically all white institutions. So I get it. And I stand corrected and I embrace that. We have on the call now, Dr. Ingrid, we have Dr. Dana Ramey Berry on.
Hello.
And when I went to her house, she is the head of a department at Santa Barbara, used to be at University of Texas and so many other great institutions. She's a phenomenal historian in terms of Blacks in history and slavery. I knew that there was some controversy about the Harriet Tubman movie. So I asked her about that. I said, they complained that they had Blacks portrayed in those movies as well as in Dango or whatever that movie is called with Jamie Foxx, that they had Black bounty hunters. And we refuted that. And then I also was curious as to, because there's a narrative slowly easing away that Blacks were the cause of our being enslaved by Europeans by selling each other. So those are the two questions I have for her. And I know y'all are just as curious as I am. So I'm going to open the floor and thank you for coming on, because she had a huge department meeting and said, I'll be on as soon as I can. So
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's nice to meet everyone. And I, again, apologize, I'm late. I was the chair of the history department at UT Austin, the first chair of color and the third woman in the university's history of 130 years, 133 years of existence. And now I am the first Black dean of humanities and fine arts at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And as Bev said, I am a scholar of the enslaved. I say that very deliberately, that I studied the enslaved people. I'm not so much as interested in the institution that just happens to be the space that they were temporarily housed in, but I absolutely am interested in their experience. And the question about the Harriet Tubman movie and about this portrayal, we did a presentation where we brought one of the producers to the University of Texas when I was still there, and there were some audience members that were very upset with me because they were saying that the portrayal of particularly Black men they were concerned about was incorrect, and that there wasn't a bounty hunter named Bagger. I forgot what his first name was, Bagger Dance or something like that. And what I shared, my response to that is that this is a film, so it's not, a documentary, but that there absolutely were many other individuals like that character in the film that were paid bounty hunters that were willing to help capture runaway, escape. I always call them self-liberated, because we're talking about language here, as my previous book speaker was saying. These are self-liberated individuals, and often bounty hunters would come after them. There are records within the archives. My receipts are the archives. So I will go to the archives and say, we are telling the stories, we're writing the history based on what is in the archive. And in the archive are documents of enslaved men that were being promised their freedom if they would return somebody that had run away, or if they were harboring them or go after them. So there were absolutely historical figures like that, like the character in the film. And I always say, when you think about our community today, in any community, there are always people that are for and supportive of the community. And there's always people in that community that try not to be in the community, that are working for other communities, right? And we see that even today. I'll just give one example. Maybe Clarence Thomas would be someone that would come to mind from my perspective, but that's just one person. So now on to the question, and this kind of goes back to maybe young kids, or maybe my generation would call it selling out. There might be a new word for it in another generation, but what does it mean to have that? And how do we make sense of that? How do we process that as we understand our history? One is that there's always people that are trying to have us focus on one aspect, and the narrative story of our people and our past is complex. It's got all kind of webs. It's deep. It's diverse, and just like we are as individuals. So when you look at the experience of those that were Africans that were captured, because I always say, when I talk about the history, Black people were free before we were enslaved, and I say that over and over again. We start with freedom. We were free, independent individuals living in great civilizations, and it's important for our young kids to know this. And to know that that's where we start this history and this conversation. They were captured. And then as they were captured, they were brought across the Middle Passage, forcibly removed, and then sold into slavery. And then that's when they experienced the years of enslavement. And at every single stage, people of African descent resisted, at every single stage. And then they became free, or they took their freedom, they stole their freedom, they were granted their freedom. They were given manumission papers that gave them freedom, or they were emancipated, in 1865 with the abolition of slavery and the 13th Amendment. So I just like this, that framing is really important. Starting and ending in freedom is really important. And one of the things that we look at when we look at those that were people of African descent that participated in the slave trade, many times people will use that argument to say, well, it's Black people's fault for being enslaved. They sold each other in, and that's, they shouldn't complain about this. Well, there's a community in Dahomey where some of you may have seen this. There was a documentary that Henry Louis Gates had done, and he had interviewed. He was really looking forward to meeting this community and wanting to meet the people that had enslaved his people. You know, he's like, I want to meet these people who sold my people. So they kind of build up to this moment, and he gets there and he says to her, he walks up and there's this huge compound, and you could tell this community had experienced great wealth, right? And he says, well, I want to know why your people sold my people. And she says, at that time in history, you had two choices. You're either trade or be traded. That was it. It wasn't about selling out. It was about saving their community. And I also have to remind my students all the time that when we talk about African peoples, there's not one African people. There are multiple cultures and languages that you have to think about. So when you wouldn't say somebody you don't look at people that have the same color skin and just assume that they're from the same country, right? And I think when we talk about Europeans, we talk about European nations. We say Russia, we say France, we say Italy. We don't say that Italians were selling out France. We wouldn't say that. But for some reason, when we talk about African peoples, we say that, and we don't realize that we might be talking to Fulani versus an Igbo. These are different groups of people from different communities and different languages, and they were selling prisoners of war, and prisoners of war in that time they could hold political office, they could be married, and it wasn't a hereditary condition. So it's much, much different than we think about it when we think about and talk about the institution of slavery. So I think I've talked long enough. I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone wanted to jump in or ask a question or have me clarify anything.
I just want to add one piece. And again, it goes back to knowing who we are. But Professor Dr. Small, he says that when we think about the numbers, it was less than 1%, less than 1% that were considered sold, if I like the trade word.
Right.
And also, when we talk about language, one word that I like to use to bring more meaning is to stop saying transatlantic slave trade. It's the European slave trade. Let's name it. Let's name it. Let's assign it.
Instead of giving it a body of water.
Exactly, a body of water. It's the European slave trade.
Thank you.
Wow. I don't know about anybody else, but every speaker thus far has literally blown my mind and my perception, because when there are interwars like Russia and Ukraine, they don't say, look at those white people killing each other. But in Africa, it's seen as a negative taboo. And these are not the same people. One tribe and another tribe are not friends. Even in the Native Americans, they had different tribes that were at war prior to the Europeans coming in. So, and Dr. Deb, 1% of that was sold. The rest were enslaved and captured, 99%. But they've made that part of the history more prevalent because it goes along with the narrative of they can't get along. So I'm going to throw that out to you, because there is a narrative that even as Black people we've bought into, which is we can't work together. So would anybody like to speak on that?
Well, that's the divide and conquer. That's what they want. But history has shown in this country across time that we actually have worked together and worked together well. Some of us, and I don't mean to, say myself, but we've sometimes worked against our own interests. So, Clarence Thomas was mentioned. We could go through a litany of people who look like us who have worked against our interests, but it doesn't mean that as a collective, if you aggregate it, that we have not worked together.
Anyone else?
I want to just add a bit to what was just said. It is so important also for us to recognize that And for me, of course, I guess of all the work that I did for not only our entire community and our nation, but for particular women, African American women have been the most uplifting and supportive of each other across the board than almost any other group of people that you can identify. We think about again, if it were not for African American women, those that were when we founded education in our sororities, when we look at our nation and we talk about how the body of politics has been influenced by who? African American women. But yet it's it's the insidiousness of the nation that wants to do the divide and conquer, as my sister said earlier. We want to plant that. Those are the things that I struggle so hard to say to our young sisters. Let us not allow folks to step in, the external forces to step in, and then use that kind of division to create again a force that makes us again struggle against each other. So I'm just so delighted to hear this is to say that's unreal. I mean, those are the small percentages of folks that are doing that. But we have to yet and still struggle to encourage our folks to talk about not the violence against each other, look at our communities, not the so-called, what other young people call it, haterators and all of that. But we've got to teach again and inspire love and encouragement and support, a brotherhood, sisterhood, uplifting. So again, we are not struggling against. I'm going to say this one thing. I'm going to say it very quickly. 45, number 45. You all know what I'm talking about, right? Did such a number to enhance and recreate the hate in this nation that began to exploit, and again, people that were already thinking that way, but they use that. He used that rhetoric and that stuff. Look how powerful. What did my sister say? Words and language can be. That if we start changing the narrative and the language, then we have to shut that piece down because it's horrific again at how much hate has been in just it's simply by how people are repeating language and words. So I just appreciate it. And I'm trying to just sit and be quiet and listen to all the wealth of knowledge that the rest of you are bringing on this panel, and hopefully begin to continue to share it out. But language is clearly important, and the same thing is we got to continue to preach that language of support and love in our own community.
And if I can build on that, I will say that the reason why we are seeing such a backlash, or as it's been said, a black lash, is because we're winning. We are winning. And that comes from community, it comes from collaboration, it comes from compassion. That's who we are as a people.
Yes.
And so we are winning. That's why we should not be surprised in terms of what is happening. But what we can't do is go into despair. We have to have hope. We are winning. So that means we need to tighten up even more. We need to lift each other more. We need to recognize when people in our community aren't doing well. We are winning, and we cannot forget that.
I just want to piggyback off of both Dr. Desi and Dr. Deb. And I just sent something to my daughter's coach at Norfolk State today. And I just said, just love up on these girls as much as you can. And as much as we know the challenges with the different generations in the workspace, when I left North Carolina Central, I had 3 70-plus-year-olds, and then I had 22-year-olds. So, of course, managing all of that. But there's so much information that's out there to help us and help people learn how to work with each other. But I just think that the lack of civility from the remnants of 45 has just torn apart that. And you think about this generation, and every day, every hour is just gloom. And so as educators, as coaches, as practitioners, how do we make sure that our young people understand happiness through all of the things that they're having to face? And I think about every day, how can I make my 3 kids, my young adults, how do I help them find happiness? Because it's so hard. And so you put that on top of all of the things that we're all talking about tonight and the challenges and the struggles. It's just simple as that. How do we help each other find happiness, civility, and then love each other as much as we can.
Wow, this conversation is phenomenal. But I'm about to steal, and I already told her I was going to steal it. So, Dr. Deb, you should not be surprised. Coaches talk with you, mentors, no, coaches talk to you, mentors talk with you, sponsors talk about you. Now, I want to get to the sponsor component. And this is going to be our last go around before we give you guys a chance to wrap it all up. But sponsor means I'm going to speak highly of you when you're not in the room. What is your conversation about each other when the other person isn't there? Are you berating? Are you belittling? Or are you uplifting? Are you selling that person? I told everybody on this panel about everybody else because I was excited about everybody else to a point where they all felt the energy and love of each other because of that sponsorship. So that's what all of these ladies have done throughout their career. When there's no presence in the room, they bring you up. They mention your name. Well, have you thought about talking with so-and-so? So I want to just throw that out there and see if any of you guys have any comments about our need to start speaking highly and not negative of each other. So I'll just open the floor for whoever wants to speak on that.
I'll start and just say it reminds me of something that one of probably a sponsor before I knew it. I knew she was a mentor as another Black woman, and then I later found out that she had been a sponsor for longer than I even knew at the time. She always said to me, "Pay it forward," and that's what I always share with my students. You help other people and you support them, and if there's somebody you're sponsoring, you advocate for them at that table for them to be considered for an award or for a fellowship or whatever it is, but speak highly of that person. And also, I think sponsorship also involves speaking positively when maybe somebody else is not, and just saying, well, I don't know that person that way, but this is what I know about them, and say something positive. So I always say we need a number two. Like sometimes when someone speaks out and then you're waiting for somebody else to come and have your back, be somebody's number two. Whether you know them or not, but in that space that you're in, be their number two. And I'm telling you, they will appreciate it. I'm always looking for my number two. So that's what I'll say about that.
So I'm going to jump in, and I love what you just said. I believe sponsors also have to use their resources. And it's not just the Rolodex. Sometimes you have to use your money. And I use always Mary McLeod Bethune. You lift as you climb. I think it's our responsibility. I think Luke 12:48, there I go towards the faith and the grace, right? And that is too much is given, much is required.
I'll just
you
build
lift
on it.
as you climb.
Yes.
Go ahead, y'all. Go ahead.
I tell my students, it's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's who knows you on a favorable basis. It's not what you know. It's not who you know. It's who knows you on a favorable basis, because you can't be everywhere, which speaks to the sponsorship. And so that means you need exposure. And so during some of the toughest times when you really don't want to attend that meeting, you don't want to go to that event, you don't want to go out, you have to. Sometimes you have to roll up your sleeves and go out there and be seen and let people see your brilliance, let people hear your gifts. We need to be seen. The other side of that is to tell people that you see them. It's not always giving someone some money, not always trying to lift them up with positive words, although those things are important and critical and keep doing them. But sometimes young people, Dr. Ingrid, just to tell them, I see you. And that can mean so much because the feedback can be so jarring for young people today. I don't want to say that we're so much different than the young people today, but I know from my experience, and of one, is that we were built differently in the sense that we were given direct guidance and told to sit down and to be still. And I don't know what's going on in society today, but some of our young people aren't used to that. So what we can do is just say, I see you. I see you putting forth effort. I see you're trying to read that article. I see you're trying to be a critical thinker. Just tell people that we see them.
You know, all of I certainly agree with all the comments that have been made about what our role is in terms of sponsorship. And I was just sort of sitting and thinking about how I attempt and how I share out and encourage other women, and certainly young women, to lift each other up. And one of a couple of things that I try to say is, don't bring me no bad news. And don't bring it to me in a negative way about some other sister that you have issues with. That what's really, I think, important is for us to, when we have, and we're going to have issues, and I think that's okay. And so I'm going to go back to something I said again in my kind of opening comments, that we don't always have to agree, but we have to learn how to disagree agreeably. And we have to learn how to bring that to each other without taking it out to a public arena, without negatively. We do our own self harm when we do that. And so for me, I think it's so important that we help to embrace each other. And in that embracing, that when we see something that is maybe negatively impacting someone, that we share that directly with them and not the world. That we say, sister girl, have you thought about reevaluating how you do this? And do you think about how your presence is impacting what you're really attempting to accomplish? And so we talk to each other with love rather than talking about each other to the world. And I think those are the kinds of things that are fundamental. Like somebody said earlier, many of us were kind of taught at an early age, but you think how many young people, especially, don't have that kind of support system in place. So loving, embracing, lifting, and sharing honest information with those that we may recognize can make some changes that will impact their lives positively, but saying it to them and not to the world. Embracing and training and helping. And so I would just add that to the conversation of the other comments that have been made.
Dr. Ingrid, before we start to get their closing comments, would you like to add anything on to that?
I'm just trying to catch up and writing all these nuggets down. This is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. And I think about what Jackie McWilliams Carter, the CIAA commissioner, kept saying over and over all last week during the tournament. I see you, I hear you, I celebrate you. And so it just resonates. And when you just said that in terms of I see you, yeah, very simple. I see you, I hear you, I celebrate you. That and just everything that you've shared tonight. I really appreciate it. I know I'm getting text messages from my colleagues and my sister friends that are on and watching. And this is just so inspiring. So thank you very, very much.
And, I want to, before I get to the closing comments, I went through a very difficult time at the University of Texas during the end of my career. I had a fabulous career there, and I love the university. I love the people there, but there's always that group of people that don't embrace who you are and what you do. And a state representative, older, who's in her late 90s now, Miss Wilhelmina Delco, who was introduced to me by, don't y'all underestimate your hairstylist in the beauty shop. That's where we all met. There are no titles at Classy Lady and Miss Jackie Glenn Stewart's shop. There's just people. There's just community. And when Clinton and Obama were running, I went to her and I said, I'm under a lot of pressure because Texas was heavy women, white women. And I said, I'm under pressure. I said, because there's Mr. Obama and there's Hillary Clinton, and they're trying to make me pick a side, and I don't want to say. And I said, what's your position? She said, all I can tell you is what my mother told me. She said, when you were in my womb, long before I knew your gender, I knew what color you were. She didn't say nothing else. I knew your color before I knew your gender. And the last thing I'm going to say to that is, fast forward to me going through a very difficult time. And I moved to California. And I got introduced through another elder to Mother Desi. Mother Desi invited me down a couple of times. And in the midst of this brokenness, she invited me to an event. And State Representative Barbara Lee gave me life through BWAPA, through Dr. Desi, by honoring me. I still have it. She gave me a state honor for the work that I'm doing in our community. And I hadn't even been there. They have no, and they said, we'll bring it to your table, of course, because people know I'm disabled. So they were good. I said, I'm walking up to that podium and getting my certificate myself. And that was the turning point of me reconnecting with the powerful entity that I was, because this society will break you. And it took a community of Black women to uplift me. And I'm not even going to talk about Sylvia, and I'm not even going to talk about Deb. I'm not even going to talk about Dinah. I'm not going to talk, because they've all been in that space with me. So I'm going to just now give everyone a chance that if you could say one thing in closing, what would you share?
Well, I'm going to jump out because mine's going to be really short. First, I want to say thank you, Bev, for what you do and what you continue to
Love
do
you.
with your soul and your spirit and your love, because you share that out, and what you share out comes back to you. And I think that's the thing that I want to say in general, that when we lift each other up, when we share out love, that love comes back to us. So no matter which area of focus we are working in, if we do that with a passion of caring and service, that will return to you so many other ways and means. And when you look around, you never know how, just the story you said, I never knew how that impacted you, and I was there. And just think how many times that we multiply that over and over again by our words, our love, and our uplifting each other. So thank you for allowing me to meet these other phenomenal women tonight that I did not know, and look forward to the opportunity to connecting with you all again. Those are my words.
So I'll jump in. I actually want to pivot a little bit and say the importance of self-care. There are moments every single day that I wonder how I'm going to make it through as I'm supporting other people in this space and helping people move to and through college, and institutions dismantle their systems of racism. It's an impossible task. And the tax on me personally can be overwhelming. And so I've learned to do some self-care. And so I think that's important. No matter what space you're in, take care of yourself. That is so important. And the last thing that I'm going to say, I'm going to hold it up, believe it, speak it, and do it.
I just want to say, I needed that message today, because I need some self-care with what's going on in my life this week. Thank you.
Dr. Deb, Dr. Dinah?
Yes. So I will leave with, to serve the people, you must love the people. And to love the people, you must know the people. And to know the people, you must be with the people. And so I'm encouraging us to stay close to the community as we climb, lift, and don't ever get so high and mighty that you don't want to be with the people.
Mhm.
Thank you for this opportunity. Beautiful.
Thank you. I'll just say something very simple that's always one of my messages, and that is to know your history. I think it's so important for us to know not just the firsts that we celebrate sometimes during Black History Month, but know all of our history and learn about somebody in the past that you've never heard of. Read a biography, read a history book, because I think it's empowering. We have a very empowering past, and I think the more people that learn about our past, the more we will feel better about ourselves for those that are struggling with that. And I just want to also echo what all the other panelists have said, is to thank you, Bev, for bringing us together. Thank you for your wisdom and your inspiration, and for always having that sparkle in your eye and that bright smile. And you come to everybody with love and peace. And I just want to say thank you for that. And finally, over the last few years of leadership, I have been telling people that I work with that we have to give each other a little bit of flexibility and grace. And that's something that I want to carry on in all the settings that I'm in. And I just wanted to leave you with that tonight. Thank you.
Dr. Ingrid.
Again, thank you all so very much. Two things. One, continue to pour love into our young people every single day. And then the other, as women, as Black women, show your wonder. When I pivoted out of the athletics chair after 14 years and being in athletics for 31 years, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I shortchanged myself. I didn't know what my skills could do. And simply making a profile on Indeed and just seeing what would come my way, it was amazing. And I'm enjoying every single day of this life of consulting and just doing what I want to do. But show your wonder, because it's in us, and we get so captivated in terms of where we are. We don't think about all the things that we can do, and it's just amazing. So those two things. And thank you all so very much.
I would like to end this by saying you guys are absolutely phenomenal, and your heart of sharing and giving and caring goes way beyond the resume of your titles of PhDs. What I would like to leave everyone with is this. It's easy to look at someone else and be in admiration. The most difficult thing and challenge that we have is starting to admire the gifts that we've been given. Because if I love me, I can love you. If I can celebrate me, I'm not jealous of you, I can celebrate you. Our greatness starts with how we treat ourselves, because envy and all of those other negative things come from a place of lack within ourselves. So don't fall for the negativity. Understand that every woman on here that stands in the gap have paid a price to be in that gap. So when you go through difficult times or challenging moments, understand that's just part of the saying, to whom much is given, much is required. So I pray that that every one of you have garnered something, some jewel, some diamond that's been pressed and comes out glowing from these amazing diamond level presenters on this panel. Thank you guys for taking time out of your schedule to share, and blessings. And I hope you guys join us the end of the month for the next one. Thank you. Good night, everybody.